today we continue our little bit of work on this Kohler K91. We're going to go ahead and start putting it back together in this video, which is good. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put the head back on the motor. As you can see, I cleaned the deck, cleaned the top of the piston, the valves are cleaned, the head has been cleaned and surfaced. We have the new head gasket, all the bolts and the washers have been cleaned. I did chase the threads with my thread chaser tool, so to speak, so they're all set to go. And essentially I dug out the old Kohler book, which is right here, the single cylinder service manual, and we're going to follow the general information right there. K91, 200 inch-pounds in that pattern. I'll probably do it in a couple stages. The other thing I'm going to do too is after I start this engine up and heat cycle it once, I'll let it cool off and then retorque the head to the 200 inch-pounds in the pattern. So let me go ahead and get that thing back together.
For starters, I just took some compressed air, I blew it around, I brought the piston all the way to the top of the bore, blew some air around just to get any debris that may have been between the side of the piston and the first ring. Get all that out, get some good old-fashioned brake cleaner, spray a little bit on a paper towel, and really make sure that the deck and the bore is clean. Now I'm drying out the bore by doing this. So we're gonna have to put a little bit of oil in there just to make sure that everything's lubricated when it first starts. And as you can tell, or you can't tell, but I can tell, that it is in nice clean shape. Everything looks good. There we go. Let me just get some oil. Here's some oil right here. I'm just going to take, this is just 30 weight oil. Just going to squirt a little bit in the bore on top of the piston here. It may smoke a little bit when I first start the motor up for the first time, but I'm just going to kind of go like this, get things going. I'll take that and I'll just kind of go like this. Make sure the bore is good and oiled up. So that way when I first start it up, because I dried it out so much, I don't want that to, there we go, good enough. Now we're going to go ahead and wipe the excess oil up. We don't need all that oil, so we'll just go ahead and do that. And then we're just going to we'll clean the deck off one more time, and then we'll set the head on with the gasket, and we'll start torquing it in. So 200 inch-pounds is about 16.5 foot-pounds. So that's what I'm going to basically do. I'm just going to do, let's see here. There we go. That's 16. All right, there we go. All right, so this is a foot-pound wrench, but it doesn't matter. As long as you do the calculation correctly, it will be fine. There's one. There's two. There's three. Sometimes I just bear hug it. There's that one. There's that one. There we go. And then I like to go over it one more time just to make sure that, you know, it's where it needs to be. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. Head's installed. I'll retorque it after the first heat cycle. All right, next.
I have all the carburetor parts cleaned, Scotch-brighted, nice, so the ends of the needles are nice and clean. I'm just going to go ahead and wipe them down one more time, blow them off with some compressed air. I got the new gasket for the bowl nut. I have the new gasket for the bowl itself. So pretty much, and then I hit the float pin with some 4.0 steel wool and polish that right up real nice. I'm going to set the needles to the Kohler book, the base setting, and I'll show you that in 1 second. I'm also going to set up the float to the base setting to the book. Essentially, as long as the bottom edge, or this top edge I should say, of the float, that corner is parallel with the base of the carburetor, almost like, almost to this position. It needs to go down just a hair, but you'll be fine when you set up your carburetors. The actual, this is for the side draft carburetor, and the float, it says should be 11/64 plus or minus a 32nd. So if you want to micrometer your float to that level, that is what the book says. And then for the needles, where is that? Right here, step 2. For primary adjustment, the main should be 2 turns counterclockwise. The idle should be 1 1/4 turns counterclockwise direction, so that, gently seat it on the seat and then turn it back according to the book. I'm going to do that for this, so that way I know it's base set, but we'll actually we'll have to do a final adjustment with a little bit of load on the motor itself. So let me go ahead and get this together, and we'll get that carburetor bolted back up. Just before I button this carburetor all up, just to show you, that's kind of like where I think the float should be. I didn't measure it. It looks good enough. As long as it's in that position, it'll be fine. One of the things I do, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do this with one hand, but I'll tip it up and make sure that the needle kind of works. So like, if you see, I'm trying to do this with one hand, I'm sorry, but if I take my pinky and kind of move the float up and down, the needle in the seat moves. So that way I know it's not sticking, before I button it all up. So I'll go ahead and make sure everything's all lined up one more time. I'll go ahead and put the bowl on with the new gasket and put the old bolt back in. Just snug it into place. Just tighten it down. If it weeps a little bit once we get it on the motor, we can always tighten it up just a hair more, but I don't want to crank it down. With the carburetor mounted and the new spark plug in place, we got a new J8C spark plug, gap to 0.25. That's just as the manual says, as well as the engine tag on the side cover. Got everything, set my needles to 2 and was it 1 1/4? I think the idle was, whatever the book said, that's what I got it. I just grabbed a couple new bolts, just snugged it all down with a new gasket. The float and everything's all set, so I'm real happy there. Next, I'm working on the coil and the ignition wire. I just peeled the spark plug end off the ignition wire. I'm going to clean that up. I'm actually going to clip this off. I do have a crack in the sheath, the outer sheath, as you can see right there, and that is where the prior person that worked on it kind of kinked the ignition wire over to mount it to this hole, to this mounting screw, bolt for the blower cover, I should say, to come up. I took my little meter. I made sure there was life in the coil. The coil's fine. It's open between the two leads, so I know the coil's good, and it's about 8 ohms resistance from either one of these leads to the core of the wire. I also took it from the core of the wire to the inside of the crack to see if I got any continuity between this wire, and I don't. It's not all the way through. Just like I said, it's just the outer sheath of the ignition wire. Part of the reason why I took this off is because I got a little piece of heat shrink tubing right there. I'm going to clean this all up. I'm going to slide that in place, get my heat gun, and shrink that down, so that way this ignition wire will be ready for action. I put the armature back on the motor. I tested the coil with my little meter over there. So from this lead to this lead coming out of the coil, I have no resistance. So that tells me that the coil is fine. From this lead, which is to the condenser, to the tip of the spark plug, I got about 8 to 10 ohms. So that tells me that that's good. So we're all set there. I did replace the end of the ignition wire. The original one was quite rusty, and I just couldn't get a good connection, good continuity through it. So I went out to the shed, and I have this old Clinton wire, ignition wire, I just took the spark plug end off it and then crimped it onto this one. Just right now I'm waiting on parts. I've ordered the correct condenser for it, and I've ordered the correct set of points for it. So once those come in, we'll put those on, set the points, and then we'll go from there. So the condensers came in today. I actually bought two. It was cheaper to buy two, plus I can put one in stock. Just good old-fashioned Kohler replacement condenser, just like the original that's supposed to be on a K91. So it has the little tang that allows it to be screwed onto the armature, and then it has the other little tidbit that sticks out so we can connect the coil as well as connect the wire that goes to the points. And I'll remake that when I put it all together. I'm just gonna have it the wire kind of hang out until I get the points. I haven't gotten that, so that way I can cut the wire and put it in so it's just nice and clean looking. Plus we can make the kill wire come right off the motor, nice and clean also. These weren't that expensive. I think they were like $6 a piece. That's why I bought two. I'm gonna put one in stock and one is gonna go into this motor. So it baffled me because the person who had set up the other kind of coil wiring system that they had did like so much extra work, and you didn't even need to do it because these things are cheap. You put them in, you hook up the wires, and it's done. So let me go ahead, get this out of the package. Let's get it screwed in. I'll get the wire made, and then we'll take a look at it, and then we'll also be in a position to put the flywheel back on this. The part number that I found for this, let's see if we can get this. There it is, 220434. Okay, the condenser's installed, just like it's supposed to be factory. I made the wire that goes to the points. I left it long so that way I can, when I get the points, I can figure out where I want to route the wire itself. I did put the little crimp connect on it. I like to cut the crimp connect plastics off. I think it just looks a lot cleaner, and it just, I don't know, these things are ugly. Even when I'm working on cars, I just cut all that stuff off. A couple little tips, I guess, or a couple of things that I do. I soldered the crimp connector onto the wire. I do that because this is under a flywheel, and I don't feel like having the customer have a no spark situation and come to find out this wire kind of got jostled or something stupid, and it's just not making a good connection. So I went ahead, crimped it, and then soldered it onto the wire, tightened down the screw, all that. The other little thing I do all the time is I'll take a wire tie and wire tie this wire down to the ignition wire. And the reason for that is when you're kind of manipulating this wire, let's say you're working on the points, or in this case, I'm going to be installing the points. I don't want this wire to get fed a little bit back into or under the flywheel, because inevitably, I've had it happen before, that wire will get pushed in, it'll just catch the end of the flywheel, and either it'll rip the wire off or it'll just eventually saw through the wire. So just a little tidbit, solder the end, small wire tie to keep everything tight and close to the coil. I'm going to go ahead and get the flywheel and let's torque it in place. I cleaned up the flywheel, installed the starter cup. It happens to be a Tecumseh starter cup because that's how this motor came to me, so I'm not going to make any adjustments on that. Just going to go ahead and put that back together just the way it was. If we look at the book, the K91, the flywheel nut is supposed to be 45 foot-pounds. So I'll go get the torque wrench. We'll set it up. I do put this little piece of wood underneath the flywheel so that way when I torque the nut, the flywheel doesn't spin. And hopefully in another day or so, we'll get the points and we'll install those. The points finally came in. Obviously not a genuine Kohler part, but this is a good part in general. Kohler number is 4715003. And when we go ahead and pop this box open, you'll see that, it's a good quality part. Real nice, just like a Kohler. The only thing that's different is they use a Phillips head screw in these two locations instead of a slot head. To be honest with you, the Phillips heads just work out easier. So I'm going to go ahead, install this, and kind of show you to the best of my abilities how I set the points, and then we'll do some quick wiring, and this guy should be ready to be put on the engine stand. Okay, with the points mounted, I just have the lower screw, the upper screw, tightened them down. They don't have to be put in with an impact wrench, just snug them down and make them tight. The next thing I did was I took this adjustment screw for the points, loosened it up so the points were kind of free playing, rotated the engine counterclockwise until we get to top dead center, and the points adjustment rod, or the points actuation rod, the points rod, whatever the hell it's called, it pushes out so that way it opens up the points to allow the spark plug to fire. Okay. Now, what I'll do with my right, well, first off, let's take a look here. It's supposed to be set to 20 thousandths, points 20 thousandths. It's also confirmed by the Kohler book. The plug is 25 thousandths. I've already put a new plug in there and gapped it. Not a big deal. So with my right hand, I'm going to hold my feeler gauge like right between the 2 points. With my left hand, I'm going to take the screwdriver and loosen up this adjustment screw. That'll allow the points to close, and I'll have it gently close down on the 20 thousandths. I'll tighten up the screw, okay? I'll rotate the engine counterclockwise, the 4 strokes, get the back to top dead center, and watch for the points to open up to its maximum, maximum space apart, and I'll come in and recheck the 20 thousandths. Now, sometimes it takes 1 or 2 times to do this to get it set, but that's a pretty quick and easy way that I do it to set the points, and usually they fire off right away. So let me go ahead and do that little process. Let's get these points set to 20 thousandths, and then we'll start talking about putting the cover on, finishing up the wiring, and ultimately get it started. I got the wires all set. I cut down the wire that comes from the coil and the condenser. I got it all situated so when I finally make the final hookup, as you can see, it's going to look nice and clean because it's actually going to come wrapping underneath this embossment, then into the points cover. This is the kill wire. I just cut off a length of black wire, and that will also go into the points, come out of the points cover. Before I solder the eyelets on, I do have to run them through the rubber grommet. Unfortunately, this grommet's a little bit in rough shape, but sometimes I don't even put these grommets in. The chances of it cutting through a wire is pretty small, but it's here, so I'll put it on. I don't have a better one. I did go downstairs and get myself a new points cover gasket, which goes on there just like that. So we'll get that in place once it's time to screw the cover down. I'm just gonna put this over. I'll put this in the box so that way it stays clean. Other than that, it's pretty much all set. So let me go ahead, get soldered. Let me get these eyelets on and then screw them onto the points cover like that, or points cover, sorry, the points themselves, and then put the points cover in place. Well, it's all back together. Got here, this is the kill wire. We have the condenser coil wire right there coming into obviously to the bottom of the points. The points cover is back in place, and this engine is pretty much set up like it was from the factory. If you recall, in the first video of this engine, we had this menagerie of ignition wiring. We had the condenser bolted to the blower cover. We had this old points bracket bolted to the top of the points cover. It was acting as, I guess, a junction for the kill wire and the condenser wire. I mean, it's just craziness. And then if you recall, under the blower cover, we had this thing, a hollowed out condenser. All that's obviously gone. We have straightened it all out. This is the way it should be, nice and clean and smooth. Ignition wires on. Everything's base set to the Kohler manual. So this thing should fire right off for the most part. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, we're not going to fire this up in this video. It's going to be coming up very shortly. We're going to reuse the test stand that I built in the 1 or 2 or 3 videos ahead of this one. So we'll be doing a full test. 1 on the engine stand, 2 on this motor. This was a fun project. Nothing too labor intensive, but just a couple things here and there to get it all freshened up and ready to rock and roll. This the original owner should be pretty happy with it. It seems to have fairly good compression. Everything is bass set, so we'll do a bass tune on it, and then this motor and the transmission, the RJ transmission that I refreshened, can go back to their original owner. Wow. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. And as always, until the next project, have a great day.